Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. Let's deal with God and logic. Now, God is often described as logical, that God follows reason and cannot do the incoherent or logically impossible. In fact, another name for God uh, is the Logos, and the root of Logos is logic. So you could ask a question, which is, um, does God adhere to logic? And if the answer to that is no, then you can argue that God is illogical. And if the answer to this is yes, the answer to that is yes, then you can argue that God himself is subject to laws, the laws of logic. Now, you know, this is problematic to say that God is subject to the laws of logic because that elevates logic above God. Because that which is subject to something else must be lesser to an extent of the thing to which it is subject. So he asks this question: does God adhere to logic? Well, clearly God does adhere to logic, so it's not no. Does that mean God is incapable of doing something illogical? No. Uh, God is omnipotent and omniscient and is certainly capable of doing something illogical if God chooses to do so. But that would be not not something you would think an all powerful, all wise entity would do to be illogical. It seems foolish. So God is not foolish. God has the ultimate in wisdom. So even though theoretically God would be capable of foolish action or illogical action, um, God does not do that because God is supremely wise and wouldn't engage in that foolishness unless there was a wise reason to do so, whatever that might be, if that's even possible. So generally speaking, no, uh, God adheres to logic and is not illogical. So this is the area that we're concerned with. Um, yes, God is logical, but does that mean that God is subject to higher laws of logic? And if that's true, the atheist would argue that God could not be supreme, and that uh, something must be greater than God, and then that undermines the very notion that God is real. So the issue is: are the laws of logic greater than God? And the answer is no. No, definitely not. And this is the reason. God is an uncaused being. That means everything about God does not have a cause. It has always been. Um, so it also means that God can't be created. It also means that God cannot be made of parts, because then God would be created by those parts. But it also means that there can't be something that is greater than God that God is subject to, because God is uncaused. God was not created by anything. So how could God be subject to something else if God is not created? So God is uncaused. God is completely one uncaused entity or being, and there isn't anything separate from God in terms of uncaused things. So God is one whole complete package. He's a package of power, knowledge, presence, intelligence, goodness, um, reality, but it's all one package, one uncaused thing. And part of that uncaused being that is God includes logic, the logic of reality, cause and effect, that one thing can lead to another, and that there's a rationality and order to things. Um, Even an example might be mathematics. That sort of um, logic and reasoning. And some logic and reasoning and the laws of logic are an aspect of God. It's an aspect of God's power to create and God's knowledge and presence. Um, and that's the reality, the uncaused reality that is God, that complete package. So the laws of logic aren't higher than God, they're part of God. They're part of that uncaused reality. Now, that doesn't mean that God consists of parts. I'm just saying that because there's no way to understand the uncaused reality that is God in terms of not consisting of parts. But it's an aspect of God. Logic is an aspect of that uncaused reality. It's part of God. So God's not the laws of logic are not higher than God. Um, God is not a lesser being to the laws of logic. Rather, the laws of logic inhere in God. They're an aspect of the uncaused God, not greater than God. An aspect of that uncaused reality and that power to create. So uh, the atheists have it wrong again. The laws of logic are not greater than God. It's actually part of God. It's an aspect of God. It's part of the package that is this singular, uncaused being we call God. All right. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Press the subscribe button. I appreciate it. Take care.